Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmett Lewis, my co-host Mikael Christiansen,
And
and exactly. And this week we have a very special guest. I'm very proud to announce that we have Yuri Marmerstein online with us tonight. How is it going? I was going to normally ask how's it going, Mikael, but we're going to skip this because we know exactly what he's up to.
yep,
And how's it going, Yuri?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. No complaints.
No complaints. Nice. How are you doing on the whole basically time is at a standstill and we're at the infinite Groundhog Day of Corona going on at the moment?
I've moved. It's been interesting because I've pursued many other interests that are now gaining momentum.
nice.
So now I'm actually like doing too many things at once, and I have to work to do some consolidation. So I'll say I'm doing good. I don't know what's gonna happen with everything, but who? Yeah, no
New
complaints.
projects.
Things are going.
Awesome. Always good to have something to do.
Yeah, well, yeah, just like last year, I just said, like, okay, I can't do this for many reasons, so I'm going to try to do these few things because I have time now because I'm not traveling.
Mm.
And now, yeah, the momentum's picking up.
Sweet.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. We'll
No
ask a bit more in
complaints.
detail because I've seen your Instagram. I see some of the things you're up to. So
Yeah, I'm curious.
it's always interesting to come to learn new skills when you already. I suppose this is one of the topics of the podcast. I suppose is learning stuff because we all kind of are always learning things, and I've always found there's this idea where like, when you've kind of, I'm not going to say mastered, but when you've pushed a certain skill set to a high level, then the understanding you get of on learning that skill set can transfer very quickly to a new skill set, or at least I don't know, a graspable understanding of what you need to focus on when you're learning to start out, or what you need to pay attention to. Speaking very broad here. But let's shelve that for a second. And because we're a handstand podcast, what talks about all things handstand, I suppose we should talk about the handstand. And it's one of the questions I would like to say we've asked all our guests on, but realistically, we've only had a few guests and they've been specialized topics. So for yourself as a fellow online handstand coach, explorer, trainee, can you give us your definition of a handstand?
My definition of a handstand is, I would guess that's a good question. So you're standing on your hands, which means no support with anything else. The only thing in contact with anything else are the hands. And then the arms would be relatively straight, right? Like something like
Yeah.
this, to where the arms look at least from one angle mechanically straight. And then I guess the hips would be the feet would be I wouldn't say even the feet would be the highest point, but the highest point should be something in your lower body past your ass.
Yeah.
Nah, even then I'm not sure. So that's a good question. So arms relatively straight, and hands are the only thing touching the
Yeah.
floor.
This is kind of interesting.
And then the body is more or less aligned somewhat vertically to some degree that can be perceived by someone who doesn't know what they're looking at. Like there's some kind of vertical.
Yeah.
I guess a planche could be a handstand, but someone who was looking at that who didn't know wouldn't say that's a handstand.
Mm.
But like a contortion handstand where they're folded, and maybe their legs are not the highest point, someone would still look at that and say it's a handstand, even though maybe like the open hips would be the highest point in a contortion handstand. So something along the lines of a vertical force vector, and something along the lines of the arms relatively straight from a certain angle and relatively vertical from a certain
Yeah,
angle.
you said something very interesting there that we kind of talk about a lot on the podcast is the arms are mechanically straight. And this is one of the things we were always trying to drill home, I suppose, is about the line. I'm going to ask you about the line in a bit. Whereas like people think the line is like trying to make the back of the body as straight as possible. Whereas the line is the mechanical line of force that passes from the center of mass into your base of support. So it's just interesting that you said mechanically straight in the arms there.
Mm. Yeah, and like one thing that I'd like to ask you also in relation to that, because I remember like this is the first time we're actually me and you are actually having a conversation. But I think the first time that I got kind of in touch with you was in the Tricks Tutorials forum, like years and years and years ago. I used to love that place. Like still, it's the best place I ever visited on the internet.
No, it was the best
Yeah.
online community
Yeah.
that ever
Yeah,
was.
yeah, it was absolutely brilliant and hilarious, and I learned so much there. But since from what I saw, at least when I first saw you, you were kind of deep into acrobatics and tricking and all of that, and I remember that like you kind of went more into learning handstands from there, and like how has kind of the acrobatic or kind of that side of you, how has that kind of related to your handstand training? Like did was there a lot of stuff that you kind of found to be different in terms of like when you started like pursuing one arms from kind of where you were and so on?
I found it to be completely different. And later I kind of used that as a test, like kind of the earthquake test, so to speak, the
Yeah.
duress test, is if I could do a set of tricking and then do a set of one-arm handstands back and forth, that means that my handstands were at a high enough level that I could do that, because that like explosive mindset is very difficult to switch off when you're in that moment. So that's what I would use as a test. But in the training, I had to the few years that I was very focused on handstand, I did a lot less acrobatics. I still did some, I maintained it, but I had to kind of put that on more of the back burner of the stove because it's a different mindset. It's not as needy of a skill. Like you can train once a week and still make pretty good progress. And I kind of put it on the back burner because I couldn't focus on everything. And if I'm doing tumbling where I'm smashing my wrists and then I'm standing on my wrists for 2 hours a day, that's also a workload that's gives a potential risk of injury. So I did a lot less acrobatics. And then I started getting back into it again at some point too. So it's a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's like one of those things right now is that I want to do everything at once, and my stove only has 4 burners. Well, shit, like how am I going to cook all these delicious meals that I want to cook? I don't know. I might have to only cook certain meals.
Yeah.
Really happy to hear you have
It's
a
a
lot
difficult
to
decision to make.
Yeah, it's kind of actually, there's something interesting I spotted on one of your tutorial posts on Instagram recently, or was it Facebook? Anyway, it was teaching walking via a cartwheel mechanism to get the swaying hip, and I thought that was kind of interesting. It's not the way I teach walking, but I can see how it's like, oh, we've got this someone obviously with yourself, and you got like quite a good tumbling background. You're quite difty from changing. It's like, oh, it's an interesting way of like getting someone up, over, and out the side at the same time, getting the idea of shifting the hip. So it's kind of interesting, I suppose, just to see. It's almost like a hybrid of like tumbling and handstands in terms of teaching a handstand
To
skill.
some degree, yeah, and it's just perspective. Like for me, I think of walking as a completely separate thing. So if I'm walking, I'm trying specifically not to balance. Like imagine like a stilt walker, right? They don't have that connection with the floor, so they have to balance by moving back and forth. So I think of it as balance by being constantly off balance as opposed to anticipating and correcting the balance. So yeah, it's just a different mindset, and to me, it makes sense with the separation, because then what I see in a lot of students is they try to stand, and then they walk to catch themselves, which is fine. It's all good. It's all part of the learning process, but then the intent becomes more clear. If I'm walking, I'm constantly moving. If I'm standing, I'm not moving. If I want to test myself, I can switch back and forth. I can walk, 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 and then brake check, and then it gives more options for. Kind of a buzzword phrase I like to use, the clarity of intent. Like, what are you really trying to do, and how is that manifesting? And I find, especially because I think we'll talk about kind of teaching yourself later on, the more clear you can be with what you're actually trying to do, that's a powerful thing.
Yeah, I think that's actually it's a very nice way of putting it, clarity of intent. And when I think about stuff that I've spent time on learning, I think the things where I've had clarity of intent have been the ones where I've had the easiest of just working on the task and kind of not even. It's funny because the clearer that idea has been, the more I've just worked on the task, left it alone, gone and done something else rather than over obsessing and trying to look on it from all kinds of angles and all that stuff. Where it's just, okay, this is what this is what I need to do, this is what I want to do, and then you just do that. And I think whenever one maybe starts out with a new skill or kind of trying to get into a new mindset, like you have so many of these kind of or you have so much information, so being able to filter that and understand, okay, this stuff is actually relevant and this is not. That is, of course, like you say, it's part of the learning process. But I think the more you're able to refine that stuff,
Yeah.
the easier it'll be to.
It's a deep question. And I'll ask this sometimes in workshops or in a class scenarios and be like, "Oh, can you give me feedback on this?" I'll ask, "What are you trying to do?" And it might sound like a condescending question, but like if I want to know that the communication is there, because sometimes there's a lack of communication in what someone is to themselves in their own conversation. What am I trying to do? Am I trying to make it like this video I saw? Can I imagine myself doing it? Can I envision a path if I can't do that yet? Do I understand what the feedback mechanism is if the manifestation is not equal to the intent? So yeah, it's an interesting, and I ask myself that all the time now, like, what am I trying to do? If I can't do that, what's a step that I have to take to get one step closer to doing that?
Yeah, it's definitely one of these things that's kind of what I suppose do a lot when I'm working with clients. Like even at the most basic level is actually more important, but even at the more advanced level, it's like, okay, so we're just doing a kick up to handstand. It's like someone, let's just say they can't do it, but they're physically capable of doing it, but they just haven't got the coordination yet. And you're like, well, what are you trying to do? Oh, I'm trying to kick up the handstand. That's not really good enough. It's more like, are you trying to kick up the handstand, but just focus on keeping one knee locked? Okay, now we have something broken down where we can very basically put a binary.
And it's that specificity of the task really important as well.
So it's just like, it's like, okay, we have the mental understanding of what goes on, then we have the translation of the mental understanding to the physical manifestation. But then at the same time, it's like, is the physical manifestation, like, is your mental understanding too broad? Like for beginner, kick up to handstand or jump to a straddle handstand. That's probably too broad a thing. It's like, are you going, okay, I'm going to straddle, I'm going to try keep my legs as wide as possible. Or I'm going to make sure I get my hips over my hands first and then worry about it later. And that kind of...
Yeah. And I think that's a powerful thing too, is like that idea of focus on one thing. Because realistically, any of us at any level, you're not smart enough to think about everything at once. You can't handle those calculations. Whatever math is going on in whatever part of your brain that's not conscious is handling most of those calculations. You can handle one of them. So that's a good intent too. And if you're making multiple mistakes, for example, in a kick to handstand, have a different intent each time. Maybe I do 5 kicks where I really focus on locking out the arms. Maybe I do the next 5 kicks where I focus on the knee, and if the arms bend, it's okay because it's still a mistake, but it wasn't the main focus. And it's this idea that I can't, if I try to focus on everything at once, the tower's going to collapse. But if I can focus on different elements with that clarity of intent, then we can start building things.
And isn't that very interesting? Like, if we relate it back to what you said earlier, Emmet, about once you've spent a significant amount of time learning something, you have at least something to reflect upon how you learned it. And if you are reasonably good at something, you likely have come to an understanding of, okay, I was really messy in my approach when I was doing this, and then as I was getting better, I was getting more aware, and then like you got clearer out at what you were trying to do, and then you were able to kind of like make more rapid progress and larger steps. And I think that like stuff, for example, like I was working with this one guy a few days ago who basically, like, the classic thing you've both seen, like it's pretty good when it's against the wall and then he goes freestanding, and then like a lot of like kind of the old problems pop up, and then he gets worried. He gets like, oh yeah, but do you think I'm ruining my progress? And I'm like, no, it's just now you have another huge thing to deal with, the fact that you're in free space, which then makes it so that the free space training is valid and good, the wall training is valid and good as well. But this just is like to use that metaphor of the clarity of intent, like since he's then spending a significant amount of time training only kicking up, for example, like he's not worrying about balancing per se in a certain amount of sets. He's only caring about, or like he's doing a kind of physical research on his body, like how far up, how hard do I need to kick with this leg, how much do I need to push with the shoulders. He gets quite a high number of repetitions done on practicing that, and then he goes onto the wall, and then like you try to put these two elements together later on when you try to balance. And of course stuff is going to get a bit messy and all of that, but at least you know what you're trying to do. He's trying to get up, get some sort of balance. It'll be a bit rough, but hey, you were working on exactly the task. So yeah, I really like
and
that.
it's that dealing with chaos too. It's like, do you have the same intent when there's more distractions? And that goes into a lot of different kinds of training. Like, okay, you can tread water swimming next to the edge of the pool. What changes mechanically when you go to the middle of the pool? Nothing. But now if you fuck up, you might drown.
Yeah.
But it's that idea that mechanically nothing changes, but psychologically it does. And that's just another, like you said, it's just another level of that progress. Like same thing, in I was talking to a guy who teaches SWAT members, and it's like that same idea. Like, okay, you learn to shoot, and then the like final level of that is you learn to shoot with the instructor slapping you and throwing dirt in your eyes, because it's not enough to just do it in the perfect scenario. You have to have it enough that when there are additional variables and complications, you still have the same focus. And is your shooting going to get worse when there's shit going on? Yeah, but the point is to train so it doesn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that idea, that same clarity of intent. It doesn't change. I'm still focusing on the same shit. It's just that there are other things going on, but I can't delegate my focus to those things. I can't delegate my focus to the potential of falling because I'm in the middle of the room, because that's going to make me fall more.
Yeah.
Because part of my mind is going there.
It's kind of one of these things of translating training, like just developing the skills to performance context as well, because we've all been performers at various stages. And it's like, oh, I can do X skill 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, 100 times out of 100 in a training hall with perfect conditions. Oh, now I'm at a stage, it's 11 o'clock at night, and there's some drunk people hollering at the edge of it. Can I still do it? It's like the SWAT team equivalent of like handstand training and performance training.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Like we would do, group aerial performances, and we would rehearse, and we would get recorded music to rehearse, and then we get to the place, and all of a sudden the stage is smaller, and all of a sudden there's dancers, and all of a sudden it's a live band now, so the music that we rehearsed to is completely fucked and sounds different, and it's a completely different count. And then maybe during the actual performance, there's people in the crowd that we now have to push away because they might get a foot to the face. And yeah, it's that idea, same idea, focus on the task. You learn to understand the variables and modify them, but it doesn't ruin your focus.
Yeah.
Because if you focus on the shit that can go wrong, then you're not going to do the thing that you wanted to do, because your focus is limited.
Yeah.
You got a stove. You're in a small apartment, man. Your stove only got a couple of burners. You can't cook all this shit. You're not Gordon Ramsay. You got 2 arms and 4 burners on your stove. What are you going to do with those burners?
Use your feet.
If you let the onions go too long, you got to keep flipping them because they're going to burn.
Like it makes me think about like what you mentioned, both with the SWAT and with performing. It just made me think about a couple of times when we were performing stuff, and like in pretty big show I used to be in, and like the show has like just massive amounts of rigging and like loads of ropes, and like there's just so much stuff that like if something gets tangled, it can basically wreck an entire scene. And I was kind of front stage, and I was basically just going to lie underneath this large net that was rigged above me, and then that net was going to fall down at a certain point. I was going to pull it off stage, and then the aerial hoop act was going to start. And then I'm just lying there waiting for the cue. The music cue kicks in. I see the bolt that's supposed to go out. It goes out, but the net doesn't fall. And like she can't do her entire act when that thing is on. The musician is starting to play the music, but I can hear him stalling and just running a couple of more bars. And I see the guy on the other side of the stage. He points to a thing, and I'm like, I just stand up, and I'm like in performance mode, kind of pretending as I'm supposed to do this. And somehow I managed to find like this little ball thing with a thread on that was on the wrong side, and I managed to chuck it over so that like the other guy on the other side of the stage caught it. And the worst is, I'm pretty sure we managed to pull it off, so people thought like, okay, that was probably supposed to be like that. And it was all due to like, in that context, what we had trained was the performative state of, oh shit, I don't know what the fuck to do now, but play it cool. Like just like play it out as if this is all part of the plan, and then somehow we just like salvage the entire thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love those moments because I'm studying acting too right now,
Ah.
and then what I understand is that in a lot of these like very iconic film moments, they weren't even part of this like the De Niro, you talking to me?
Yeah.
Like, are you talking to me? I get that was just the director yelling at him from across the room, like some cues, and the camera was still rolling, and he was actually just talking to the director. It wasn't even so. It's like a lot of these iconic moments weren't even supposed to happen because then it gets away. It's more in the moment.
Yeah.
It's more real.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's the same thing. That's why I love like these chaotic moments where it's whatever you rehearsed goes to shit, and now all of a sudden it's reality. But that reality is how do I deal with chaos? Which direction does my mind go to?
Yeah.
Does it freeze or does it find a solution?
You guys just reminded me of one of the most chaotic things that ever happened in a circus show. So it was when I was in circus school. The year ahead of us were doing their end of year group show, and they had a big top down in London that was doing the show, and it was a Saturday matinee for children. And there was two girls doing a double aerials routine, and they finished the routine by doing double barrel rolls around the bar. Now, they're wearing hot pants and tights. The hot pants and tights kind of wound around each other around the
that
bar,
stuff.
and they got locked into place that they couldn't get out. And they were stuck. They were clearly just stuck. The kids were laughing, everything. It was kind of funny, it was thing. But then like, but one of the guys, they had two older circus performers in the show to kind of, as the main kind of cast, or the main, basically keep the focus. And he come out of nowhere. He'd seen it happening. Obviously went backstage, got an EMT scissors, climbs a rope in a ringmaster's costume with his scissors between his teeth, cuts the girls out. They drop off onto the crash mat underneath. Looks like it's all meant, but both the girls end up like without their pants on and just have to kind of run off stage very quickly at a Saturday matinee.
Oh my God.
And yeah, but it was one of those ones that's like, yeah, there's a lot of parents going like, I'm not sure that was appropriate for a kid's show. They thought it was like part of the show. It just pulled it off sort of thing. But like the girls were like, I suppose I was kind of ushering the show so I could kind of see a bit from backstage. But they were panicked to fuck because they were not going to be able to reverse around the bar
Yeah, it
and
was
get
too
out.
stuck. Yeah.
So it was, yeah, it's interesting those kind of panic moments that happen.
I love those moments. Like that's why I go into something now specifically without a plan because it's like if I can research it, sometimes I would rather not research it because I want to see what happens when I'm surprised. Because then the moments are more real.
Yeah.
I like that surprise. I like that. What happens to your mind under chaos?
I think it's also quite relevant. I mean, if we kind of speak directly handstand related to whether it's training or performance, and in terms of clarity of the intent, that thing that like I love to talk a lot about, kind of the ability to fight and the ability to handle balancing whatever is happening, and that is one large part of where the focus goes, so that like because you are going to encounter those chaotic scenarios both in your training context and in any like situation where you'd like to show it off essentially, and then being able to kind of to catch it, because that like being able to handle your body, which is essentially what a handstand is about, you're able to catch it, you're able to deal with it without hurting yourself. And like also I was just thinking now, like in regards to acrobatics, I was in the town of Rennes in France once with a friend of mine, a circus school guy named Valia, and he's a really good acrobat. Like he's does Chinese pole, he can do all the flips, he's pretty controlled. And we were out and we were partying and we were in a subway, and he's a bit drunk and very energetic. So he suddenly out of nowhere he decides to do a backflip. So he has a beautiful back tuck. It's high. He rotates at the perfect spot. Everything. He just jumps super high, and instead of tucking, like you see his legs come towards his face, and as he's like starting to pike me there, he just looks me in the eyes, and it's just he understood he fucked up, and like he's just heading straight down towards his neck, like on just concrete floor. And he's just able to. I'm sure you'd be able to do stuff like that too, Yuri. If you notice midair that something goes wrong, like he basically sneaks his arm in underneath himself and kind of just like slides it out and just like smashes on his back, and it's like, oh shit, this was horrible. Okay, I just need to do this again to not get afraid. and then he just did 3 backflips in a row, and then we went on the subway, and like he was calm. But it was just so funny.
Those moments happen.
Yeah.
And I guess I had one interesting. This was a few years ago. This was like when I was starting to get back into acrobatics. I was visiting, I don't know, Colorado or some shit, and they had one of those air floors. So I was just messing around, and I did just a round off back handspring on the air floor to test the timing, and I went too high. I went high enough that I started to rotate, that I was in the air, and I knew, like, okay, I can't land on my feet, and I can't flip because I have no rotation. So I just do a quick look, like, am I going to land on the air floor, or am I going to land on the real floor? Because real floor is going to suck. And I did, a suitcase. It didn't feel good, but I, had that moment in the air, like, fuck, well, I'll just do what I can and then try to minimize the worst risk.
Cool. I'd like to cycle all the way back to another question on technical handstanding and definitions before we get too off the topic or onto the topic. So, everyone is always fantasizing about the line. What is your definition of the line, or have you got one?
I do have one, and it's changed a lot over the years, both in my own practice as I got really into handstands and then a little bit more out of it back and forth, and working with different people. So the mechanical line is not the aesthetic line. The mechanical line for me is a vertical line through the arms, and then the hips somewhere along that same vertical line, and that's it if we were to really get general.
No, that's good.
So the arms are holding, right? The arms are holding you up. So from this angle, vertical.
Your ears turn 90 degrees to camera.
From this angle, also vertical to the floor. And then the elbows, depending on the person, of course, the elbows straight enough that you don't have to use a lot of muscular force of the arms to be able to hold yourself up. Like, I would say, hyperextension if you have it. Not everyone does. So it's good not to obsess about that too much because there is a genetic factor of the elbows. There's a lot of potential injuries. So vertical line of the arms from every angle, and then the hips somewhere along that line. Because, people obsess about, my back's not straight. Well, like a lot of world-class hand balancers also, their back's not straight, but they know how to hold themselves. My shoulders aren't open. Again, like, it wasn't that long ago that nobody had open shoulders, that Jack LaLanne was doing one-arm handstands in between whatever the fuck he was doing. He was a beast. And he had an arched back, and I always use that photo of Sean Connery for reference as well on the set of Dr. No. Man, somebody tell this guy to engage his fucking abs, because that handstand's completely wrong. You think he gives a fuck?
It reminds.
So it's.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, it's this idea of using less muscular force from a mechanical standpoint, and that's not going to look the same for everybody. And that's what I tell people as well. Like, you're obsessing about a straight line. It might take you a lot more mental focus to get your back that straight in a position that's probably not even that comfortable for you in the first place. So, like, if it's easy to hold, then work with it. And if you want that aesthetic of a straight back, by all means, continue. But there's a point at which getting a straighter handstand no longer improves your actual skill. My thoughts anyway, my perspective.
No, it's pretty
Some people
close
are
to us,
going to
I'd
say,
say.
that's bullshit.
Yeah, it's pretty,
yeah.
I completely agree with your wording as well on what that means. And it just made me think here, like, now when you said this, it made me think, like, there is a Chinese hand balancer that lives here in Stockholm, and she's like a mega beast. She's one of the, like, when she was 15, she was one of those girls you see in the Chinese videos that are up on one cane for however long. And
they go to the gulag if they bend their elbows.
Basically, she told me stories like, when we left circus school when we were 6 years old, we used to count like the blue marks after the stick of the teacher and stuff. But she explained, like, she because she usually warms up, but she goes on one cane and she does like, I think she does like 20 hops or something. And I was doing hops there as well, and she gives me advice, and she said like, like, don't worry where your legs land, just make sure your hip is on top of the hand when you land. Like, that was all she had to say to me. And I mean, I totally agree with what she says. And she's of course the one that, like, she will land on a completely straight arm, and then she's so flexible that her adjustment will happen basically all in the hip, where I will go kind of more shoulder and elbow because that's where I have more capacity to go with. But
yeah, they use that oversplit a lot, the Chinese contortionists.
But it's interesting, just that thing of like you just need to have your hip on top of your arm basically, and you want to have your hip on top of the arm in a way that mechanically does not drain a lot of energy for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I use the Chinese as an example too. Like a lot of them don't have that good of an aesthetic line because their method is more, well, if you can hold a one-arm handstand for 5 minutes, it probably doesn't matter what your line looks like because it's good enough that you can hold it that long.
Someone hasn't told them their line is wrong.
Yep.
You know, I've had like 50 Instagram coaches commenting going like, oh yeah, it's good and all, but your back could be straighter.
Yeah, it's the classic.
Exactly.
It's the classic. Yeah, it's kind of, it is interesting, like this kind of question of aesthetics becoming the de facto way you do something.
I think people like to have an absolute. They don't want, and maybe it's getting a little bit too deep into psychology.
No, go deep.
I think a lot of people don't want to have options because I'm going to tell them, well, like they want to know that this is right and this is wrong because that's a simple way to view the world, and it's a simple way to view the handstand. Oh, straight handstand is right, banana handstand is wrong. But handstand can be so many different things, and you can be so many different things if you just believe in yourself. but it's about like they don't want options. They don't want to hear an answer. Oh, it depends. Yeah. They want to, right? And it goes into, I'm sure you guys get the same questions. Oh, do you have any tips? What do I do for this? Well, here are some potential options that you should probably explore because I'm not you and I can't tell you what works for you. I can tell you what's worked for me. I can tell you what's worked for people that I've coached. I'm still exploring myself. They're still exploring themselves. I'm still exploring better methods to work with other people. And it's ongoing.
Yeah.
And the more that I know, the deeper that it goes, the less direct answers there are. But the line is one of those things that it's like, because it's easy to visually quantify, straight line, not a straight line, people kind of hang on to that. This is right, this is wrong. And then it becomes their religion of, I'm going to, right, that the red check or red X on Instagram, red X, you can't have any arch in your back. It's not acceptable.
Yeah, I remember, like, I've said this on this podcast before, but like, I remember very distinctly, like on some Facebook post or something, someone was doing a Maltese, and it was a pretty good, like, legit street workout dude Maltese, but it was like there was a little bit of an arch in the lower back, and that's what someone commented on. It's like, hey, yeah, you know, like you have a little bit of arch in your back in your fucking Maltese, which is like very few Olympians on the rings even compete it with perfect form. They always get deductions there too, so just like, chill out.
Yeah. I think he knows. Yeah. If you're at that level that you can do it, I think, like, you know where your back is. I don't think it's a question. I think you have enough body control and awareness.
I'm still waiting for...
And even still, aesthetics, the new school, like hollow body, I don't think that's as aesthetic. I like the old school gymnastics where they arched because it was to me it was a more presentational posture. Yeah. Now that's perspective, but who's to say what's right?
Yeah,
and wrong?
It's kind of interesting because we kind of covered this in. Is it Professor Paulinetti's book or was it the York course? One of them anyway refers to the straight handstand specifically as the European handstand. And it says the text is like, oh, we prefer the curving flowing lines of the American handstand, which is the arched back and arched chest, to the straight line of the European handstand. We find it more aesthetic in our course, so this is what we teach. But then as a thing, they did have the straight handstand as an option, but it was an option. But they chose like, oh, No. We're going to do all our stuff with an arch back because we prefer the aesthetic of it. Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's the other thing is, and that's what I ask a lot, and that's what I kind of encourage students to ask as well, is what's the teacher reasoning for why they do what they do? It doesn't matter what they do, but if they have a clear reason for it, like I teach the arch handstand because I think it looks better. It's a good reason.
Yeah.
I teach the straight handstand because the internet says that handstands should be straight, and I read that you can hurt your back if you don't engage your core properly. That's a pretty shitty reason. That's a reason that doesn't come from their own perspective. That's a reason that comes from listening to other people who don't know what they're talking about, share their shitty perspectives, and then it's like just a feedback loop of nothing, of somebody that has an experience. So it's this idea that perspective that comes from experience. I teach the arch handstand because I like the way it looks. The straight handstand is also acceptable, but it's not my preference.
Nice.
That's a really good reason.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a funny thing also that with that I think is like come from our like the kind of imposed how to say the imposed conception of architecture that's just come from human civilization. We're used to a straight structure being effective because if you do that with an iron bar, it works. But I mean, if you look at everything in nature, everything twists and twirls and does all these kinds of things. And I mean,
spirals, man. The world moves in spirals.
Oh, shit, we're gone.
Our DNA is a spiral, bro.
we should do spiral handstands. Maybe that's where it is at.
Crossed hands for everything. It's kind of interesting, actually, to go back to the line thing of. I remember one of my hobbies is making clothes and this kind of thing. But I was following. There's one of these blogs I used to follow called Cutter and Tailor. And it was one of these guys who learned the old English style of making men's coats. And he learned from this guy, it's a very specific style of coat, like Italian suits have a certain style, English suits have a certain style. But normally with a drafting, when you're making a pattern for a suit, you'll use a set square, a ruler, a French curve, all these kind of tools. And his teacher just had them banned in their workshop. And his rule was like, basically like, here's your ruler. If you can find a straight line on the human body, you can use it to make a suit. But if you can't show me that straight line, then, you just got to do it with your eye and figure it out. And that's the kind of interesting thing of like, oh, we're trying to make something curvy, flowy, sinuous without relying on straight lines.
Everything is an approximation.
Yeah, basically.
And that's what a straight line is it doesn't exist. It's a way to approximate something we can't understand to that degree of precision.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, we're going into the nerd mode. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's great.
Physics.
This is what we should be doing.
Yeah.
But I mean, like this conversation is part of what I feel is in general lacking. Having come from kind of inside the circus community, seeing kind of the proliferation of a lot of both like mid and higher level handstands into kind of fitness communities, and then the language and the kind of conceptions shaping there, and seeing how they were shaped within the circus. And neither of them ask any interesting questions, because the questions we are asking here, I find them interesting because they're problematic, and they are, as you said, Yuri, like they are questions that doesn't have a direct de facto answer. And like another very good example of this is like when I've been working with students in circus schools for longer periods of time, and there's particularly like one school I had 3 different students, and all of them were so different and had such like their potential was just, they were in just widely different directions, both as artists, but also just as their athletic ability was very different. Like one of the girls was a beast presser. The other girl, like she would struggle to learn to press. And one of the guys had like a crazy ass flexible back. And why shouldn't they be or like be encouraged to take, okay, you have this thing, you all have a certain set of basics to a degree that you can use them, and then they could specialize in different directions because they had that potential. And I find that to be way more interesting than having like a like a linear and kind of hierarchical learning curve that has to be like this or like that, because like first of all, everyone are different, and then secondly, like people are people and might have different
well, and there's different levels of genius too. A lot of people think like, oh, we have an education. There are uneducated people that are, right? So it's like the same idea with education system. They have everyone do the same linear, and then this test determines who you are and what you can do, and that's complete bullshit. Because some people aren't good with numbers, but they're good with abstract thinking. Some people are good with numbers. Some people can't fucking read, but they're geniuses.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's this idea that you have that area that you can go to, that you're in a position to develop highly. Yeah, why wouldn't you do that instead of following what the linear pathway is?
Yeah, I think there's one of these things with the linear pathways. In some ways, like everyone has to do the exact same thing. We get this in training circles and education circles and everything, is it kind of just flattens all the peaks. Because like if you're really good at something, then you can push. If you push in that way and maximize your talent, if you look at all the people we admire as geniuses or very good at a virtuosic or whatever, they had one thing they were good at, and they pushed that, and they just tried to not let the things they're bad at hold them back too much. But they didn't go like, oh, I'm really good at music, but I'm not so good at painting. I better spend hours doing my painting to get my painting up to mediocre level. Whereas like, okay, I'll just go and be really fucking good at music and then not worry about doing painting. And
Bro, you have to be a generalist.
Generalist, bro.
Don't you know that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things. It's like, it's always this idea like there's good to have a broad skill set, particularly in a specific discipline. But then at a certain point, you do have to specialize in either one, the area that interests you most, and two, the area that has your most potential for talent. These mightn't be the same things as well. So there is that kind of thing. But
yeah, and I like the idea of also doing things that you're not good at to never get good at them.
yeah,
Like just to do them, just to get the perspective of what it is to do them, and to get off the high horse of, oh, I'm good at something, so I don't have to bring myself down to that level again.
yeah,
And I think it's really important, like it both ways. You have something that you should develop to a high level, and that could be anything, because if you don't, you miss out on that perspective. And then you do different things that you're not good at, that you have no intention of getting good at, but it doesn't matter because you learned something from doing them.
yeah. That sounds, yeah, that's how I treat bouldering and climbing. I go, I do it. I have no intention of ever getting good at it or even going past the second level or whatever kind of level things. If I can go up the wall, I go up the wall. If I can't go up the wall, I don't care, but I'm not a boulderer. I'm not someone who's going to go, oh, I'm going to sit down and figure this problem out for hours. I'd literally just go to treat it like a wall-based roller coaster. And that's great.
I didn't even know there were levels. I just like climbing all the random rocks, and then somebody told me, oh, the colors mean you're supposed to follow that path.
Yeah.
I was like, well, shit, I was just climbing.
Yeah, I had the same, like the first time I went up the wall. I was like, oh, I'm going to start here. And then he's like, oh, but you can't start there. I'm like, why can't I start here? No, it starts over there. I'm like, oh, fuck, okay. And then I was like halfway up the wall. I was like, oh, okay, I have to go back down and then try the route. And that was way too hard.
Don't impose your rules on me, bro.
The wall's
But
there,
it's
just
also
climb
interesting.
it.
It's interesting with all this, like if that is kind of bringing it a bit back to the to kind of the why you do things, and like who sets the rules and who decides what is kind of valuable and important to learn. And I think it's clearly like it can be. I have several activities that I like to do, and I think that's cool, and that's brought me a lot of, like you say, perspectives, and it has brought me like confidence and all kinds of things. But I think it's very easy to constantly look outside of yourself for like, okay, is this the correct thing I should be doing now to signal to everyone else that I'm doing valuable enough activities, in a sense, like, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at handstand, but hey, I'm not so good at planche. I should probably do a bit of planche because I'm not this kind of person. Or, oh, I need to train my legs, or else I end up as a person that has chicken legs, and that means I am like this because that's what other people say about it.
You are the ultimate gym bro, though.
Want, and then do what you want and then enjoy it. Like, I used to have comments from the same guy like, oh, when you gonna work on your flares? Like, what if I don't want to do that? What if that's a move that I don't really care about? So probably never. It's like, oh, bro, but you should. Why?
Because then you're a generalist.
If I don't want to do that and it doesn't bring me joy, I don't need that skill set. What's it going to do for me? It's not going to get me jobs. Yeah. It's going to get me a couple likes on the internet, but the algorithm's fucking me now anyway. So who cares, man? Who cares? And I kind of hit this stage with my social media too. I posted a photo of myself napping, and that did better than most of my posts. I was laying on the floor fucking sleeping. So like, all right, I see. Okay. I'll play your game.
You do a sleep account. Yuri sleeping.
Yeah, Yuri sleeps.
I like that. Okay, I got a question. I got a meta question for you. What question would you be liked to ask to more?
Ooh. I don't know. I haven't. The reason I do these questions, I don't do them anymore. It's so much on the Instagram, but I would ask me questions, and I would just give people shit for asking bad questions, and that was kind of like a repeating cycle. But because I'm looking for the good question, and I want to keep searching for it. I believe that it exists. And a good question, this is maybe it's more general. It's not a specific one. 3 parties can learn from a good question. The worst question is, give me information. Bro, you got any tips? What's the best way? I don't know the best way. So the best question is where I learn about myself from answering it. I help somebody get perspective on what they had a question about in the first place. And then a third party listening to that can also gain something by different perspectives. So it's like the best question is the one where the answer permanently changes how you think about or view something.
Nice. I like it.
Substantial.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
It's not a specific question, but I want it to have meaning. Like, how are you? I don't even know. Maybe it's just my own social inadequacies. I don't know how to answer that. Like, how am I? I don't know. I don't care how I am. I am. Therefore, I am. That's not a meaningful question. Any tips on press handstand means that you don't give a shit enough to research yourself. And the question I give you is probably not going to help you anyway, because it's going to be so generalized that it may not even be the best. It may not even be the best advice for you. And then I don't like super personal questions because I'm just not I don't really share personal information, but I like ones that make me think about myself and who I am, because I'm still getting to know myself.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot, and there's still more to learn. Why do I do what I do? I don't know. Nobody knows it.
What do I do? For the likes. It's only
I have
for the
no
likes on
fucking
Instagram.
idea either.
Yeah. Awesome. So, yeah. So, another one that's kind of topical for us, or thing that me and Mikael have talked about a lot in the past, is, well, how's it? I've noticed you're going to start releasing some more video courses and video materials online. And I've seen you doing one on handstands. I know you have some other stuff on Vimeo and other things. Obviously, plug your stuff as well and give us a shout out about what you're up to if you can. If you're at the stage, you can share. But how do you feel about this kind of thing, the transmission of knowledge to a digestible manner over a non-interactive source? So video courses are non-interactive. It's like I will explain something to you on a video. The person will watch it. There's this kind of transmission of what you hope the person gets and other thing. I'm not certain where I'm going with this question, but there's
I get it. There's a layer. There's something missing. It's
Yeah.
like, when you use a paper filter in the coffee, it absorbs some of the oils,
Yeah.
so you don't get all of the delicious flavors. And there's more. It's to some degree I've grown as a coach from it, because I have to anticipate somebody's how somebody is going to interpret what I say. So I want to say something in a specific way that leaves the least amount of room for artistic interpretation,
Yeah.
because I'm clear with what I want from somebody, but we don't completely speak the same language. Learning style is not the same. So from the online coaching medium, I've learned to explain things in a way where I'm better at anticipating potential faults. At the same time, there's no energy exchanged.
Yeah.
Right? There's no that instant feedback of learning in person is good, because I like in the workshop scenario, going back to that chaotic situation, I don't have a rehearsed workshop that I teach. I kind of have a general pathway I might follow that's subject to change, and I do that specifically because I know that my mind works better when there's chaos.
Yeah.
I know that I can create a better solution when it hasn't been pre-planned, and if I make a mistake and I fuck up, I like having that opportunity to correct that mistake, and the online medium doesn't allow for that. So on the other hand, it's easier to get something widely spread out, right? Because you can scale it up.
Yeah.
And hopefully the communication is good, that at least you can get more people interested in it, that hopefully they end up doing an in-person learning experience. And I've learned a lot of stuff from YouTube or from a non-interactive medium.
Yeah.
When that was all that there was. So it's good and bad. I think ultimately it won't and shouldn't replace in-person teaching, because there's just something about the energy of, and I'm saying this as a very introverted level of the spectrum. I hate people, but I will say that there's a powerful energy exchange when there's people in the same room going back and forth on the subject, as opposed to, even if it's even Zoom, right?
Yeah.
Even this kind of lesson, there's some energy exchange, but there's a delay.
Yeah.
So you don't hear, and it's getting transmitted into a digital medium, right? But it's not as powerful when it's like the people that, I'm going way over the place. It's like the people that listen to vinyl.
Yeah.
instead of electronic music, because vinyl is the actual music. Electronic, every whatever split second there's a beat that's at this frequency and it turns into something, but it's pixelated instead of what actually is.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of good within the online medium, but I don't think people should pursue online training as a means to completely replace in-person training, because there's just that energy exchange that's missing. And from a teaching perspective, I'll teach a 6-hour like seminar all day, and obviously I'm tired from that. I'll teach a 1 to 2 hour Zoom class, and I'm just as tired from that Zoom class because I have to project and I don't get anything back. So it's like I'm projecting energy into the void, and where's it going?
It's fueling
It's
Bill
going
Gates
off.
conspiracy.
Yeah. It's fueling Bill Gates' vaccines, man. He's buying all the farmland so he can grow vaccines. The world's going to shit.
No, I totally agree on that one, because like it's one of these weird things that I've basically moved all my teaching onto online over the last few years, bar workshops and seminars. And it's very interesting to try and create this, like, as I always say this, like my students, the one I work with a bit more closely than the courses, it's like we're trying to create a training dialogue. I'm not here just to dictate what you're going to do. It's not like, do 5 sets of 10. That means nothing in terms of thing. It's more like, tell me how that set of dishes smelt. And this is kind of what we're kind of looking at. And that's what's kind of missing. I suppose this energy thing I was talking about is like, the atmosphere surrounding the training. It's like the unconscious learning that your subconscious is doing by watching someone else who can do the skill, or someone else failing at the skill, because this gives you this increases your body map and your potential to it.
And it's also just like it's just a fucking presence, like of being there. Like it's everything that we don't think about: the smell, the light, the context. And I mean, in any room where there's a number of people, you just need to add or subtract one person, and the energy of the room is different. Like everyone kind of contributes something, and that, I think, that specific soup is so important. And I had like a good conversation here about this with a friend of mine, Amanda from Hong Kong. Shout out to you, Amanda. I said that I would shout you out right here, so now I did it. Kaboom! But we were basically speaking about just like these kind of things in terms of teaching, both in like the online and the kind of offline medium. And I think there is another thing which is very often can be overlooked, and that is the trust and kind of the, like, I come to you, Yuri, because like I have a dream to do this backflip, and like, okay, I watched your YouTube tutorials and I've done these things and like I've trained these things, but like this weekend I'm going to meet you and I'm going to experience you as a person being there, and that I think makes a huge difference when the kind of the in-person context and kind of just that inspiration. I mean, like that when I think about it, like I don't have a lot of people that I kind of look up to like as kind of gurus or anything like that, but there are a couple of people I'd be like, oh, it'd be very interesting to see them in context, hear what they have to say, experience how they experience the world. And I think that there's a huge part of that which has to do, particularly when you're a beginner within things, like you want to see, okay, this person, he's gone through all of this and experienced all of that, and now he's here and I can see it firsthand. And I think there's like that kind of mixture of delicate details, I just think becomes very important to that social gathering that it ultimately becomes. And it becomes
being in the place.
Yeah, and it becomes ritual. Like you're making a ritual context where you allow this specific thing to happen, where you go into it with a specific purpose. There is purpose in the doing, and you come out with something.
Yeah, and looking back, like thinking about the kids, the way kids learn, because we still have that. A lot of it gets turned off, but kids can learn something just by being around it, just by being in the environment.
Yeah.
Right? You'll see like kids whose parents do whatever, they just watch, they just observe, they don't even do it. And then later on they can do it because they've learned just from breathing in that atmosphere of being around what that thing is. and we don't have as sensitive of an understanding of it as adults, because we hit that psychological stage where we think we know about the world, but it's still there. And yeah, this idea, like I said, I'm not a social person, but I still like to be in a place and observe.
Yeah.
Like if I'm in a gym, half of my time is spent training, and the other half, as creepy as it sounds, I'm watching other people do shit, because I'm learning by observing them, by being in the same place as them. And I'm watching other people teach classes, and I'm imagining sometimes, like, what if I had to teach that class? Could I do it? What mistakes are they making? What mistakes would I make? So there's like, there's an energy of being in a place, and you don't really appreciate it until you don't get to be in a place, because the government tells you that you can't.
Indeed.
Yeah,
it's very noticeable.
Locked down again. Yeah.
Nevada's actually opening back up. We were on a pause, but California opened because the governor's getting close to being recalled. So he's like, oh, hey, guys, now it's okay. Now you can go around, but make sure you wear like 10 masks. And then the Nevada governor kind of likes to follow what the California governor does. So he's raising the capacity of gatherings and all of this kind of shit. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
We're at the highest level of lockdown. They're basically just slowly titrating out that we're going to stay there till everyone's vaccinated, or most people are. So that's great.
And
it's
here
kind of
it's
funny
pretty chill, like Sweden. People are on, like, a lot of people are on skiing vacation right now, I think, from what I read in the news.
Skiing vacations is what fucked my country. Everyone, all these
yeah,
people
that's what
went,
fucked it
like,
here too, apparently. But they're on skiing vacation now in Sweden, though.
Everyone went to Italy and then got wrecked.
Like, we're supposed to, with this handstand project I have, we're supposed to do we got offered to play this work in progress presentation next month. And we need to see if we can do it, because, like, the amount of COVID tests we would have to do to enter and exit Denmark, where we would do it, would basically end up with us paying, like, I think more than 1,000. No, wait. Might be like 1,500 euros only in corona tests for the entire crew to go in and exit the country. So we don't know if it's possible to do yet, and, like, we don't know if the regulations will be the same then, even at that point. But
and they're gonna destroy your pineal gland by sticking shit that far up your nose, so you're gonna lose your third eye vision.
Oh yeah, they
so,
probably have uranium.
Maybe it's the force for, like, good. They're actually sticking the thing in there to crack the calcium shell, or your fluoridate covered pineal gland shell, to actually open it up again for you.
Next level.
I never thought about this.
Thought about it that way. Perspective.
I have my fucking tinfoil hat in my cupboard right over here.
You're gonna need it with that 5G coming out, man.
I just want my 5G signal to get better.
Yeah, I did have the 5G crew at my gym here the other day. They were coming in there. They had the huge poster saying, like, 5G kills and stuff. And they were going around checking the various, like, Wi-Fi adapters and stuff inside of the gym. I think they decided it was safe in the gym, because I think they bought a gym card there in the end. So
we have to hold on. I have to test the 5G Wi-Fi signal. No. Anyway, before we get too into because there's always the risk on when you do a podcast. Is like every podcast always has, like, you can always just take that veer off into conspiracy land, no matter what. It's like, Yuri, have you ever smoked DMT? But we're resisting. We've been fighting this one since day one. So, as is tradition in our podcast, and by traditional I mean we started doing this for season 2, so 4 episodes. We've started doing Q&As at the end of the podcast. If anyone would like to send us a question, either voice note it to us, so you can either send it to us on @handstandfactory at Instagram, if you follow us there. If not, if you go to our website, Handstand Factory, and you can find a link to our Anchor where you can voice some questions in. This week, it's one question I actually saved for Yuri. Now, I'm going to give a warning. It came with a very long email, and I'm going to skip all of that because it's very lengthy. So thank you for typing out such a big lengthy one, but I'm just going to get to the summary questions at the end. And yeah, so one question that we kind of touched on a bit anyway, but what is the point of having online coaches / workshops if there's so much free information already out there? And where the effort of the student on a regular basis is far more important than some intermittent trainings with a coach. And please do not the obvious answer that I can meet with fellow handstanders. So what is the point of online coaches and workshops if there's so much free stuff already?
So There are many answers to this. First of all, there is no point.
Yeah.
You can learn anything at this point. You can learn anything you want for free on the internet to any advanced level. MIT released their like advanced PhD course materials for free. You can learn if you have the desire to do the research, and it's not going to be handed on a plate to you. You can learn anything you want for free. However, most people don't have the drive to be able to do that because you have to search. You have to find the right pieces of information. You have to apply it to yourself. You have a bias when you're working with yourself. There's a good chance when you're training, and I went through this many years, and I still do, whatever you think you're doing, it's probably not happening. And you need a third party to tell you that because they have an unbiased observation of you.
Yeah.
Even if you know what to do, a coach is powerful because sometimes just hearing somebody else say it, or maybe just hearing somebody else say it for the 10th time, like that was the time that you get it. So this idea of a workshop, of a coach, if you get one nugget to take back into your practice, like one gemstone, then it's a value because that's maybe one gemstone that you wouldn't have discovered yourself as fast. That being said, I encourage anybody, like I don't promote my online coaching services. I only do it for people that find it and contact me because I would rather people learn on their own. I would rather people do the research because then they build their own learning process. That being said, you're going to be, it's like you're in the woods and you're wandering on a path, but you don't know which way to go. If you have a guide, you're going to understand that path faster. So having a coach, it's going to keep you accountable because some people aren't going to work only for themselves. Some people need, and there's nothing wrong with that, some people want to have somebody tell them what to do. There is that unbiased approach when somebody is working with you, they can pick out mistakes that you don't know that you're doing because there is that blurriness when you're looking to yourself, whether it's either narcissism or self-hatred or just a lack of understanding or knowing yourself. There's always that, and there's always a bias. And there are people, like good people who have spent years researching this topic who can give you a valuable perspective that might change how you view it. So on the one hand, no, nobody needs a coach. You can learn whatever the fuck you want by yourself. On the other hand, having a coach can be helpful, and it might make you learn something about yourself that you would not have learned otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a very, like, it's a nice sum up because when I think back on my own kind of learning, when I started breaking and went into hand balancing and stuff like that, I was considering not going to circus school because in the first year of learning handstands, that I basically skyrocketed. I could do a bunch of one arms. I could do good enough vocabulary to be like a low level performer compared to what I eventually became. But if I lived in Norway, like if I stayed living in Norway, I could probably have built a career on that. But to me, I was interested in kind of going into the depths of it. And like you say, there's so much information out there right now that you can go on YouTube and you can educate yourself within whatever it is. But I think, first of all, the people that do that, because it's the people that end up doing that are those who are extremely driven and very interested in a certain topic. But we must also assume that like the interest of those who are not ready to put in that much time and that much dedication into something, it's not less worth just because like they are not going to sift through all of the 10,000 different handstands videos out there. But hey, they really want to stand on their hands because they're pretty fascinated. And I think in that context, like they might need more coaching and or they would like to have someone to work with, because what also happens in this ocean of information is basically that like how do you know what sources to trust? And if you do have experience of the type that we spoke about in the start of the episode, you've mastered something before, or you've done acrobatics or something that makes it possible for you to see, okay, yeah, this stuff looks good, this maybe not so much, and then you find your way through that works. But that is definitely not going to.
That's a really good point too, is like, how do you know?
Yeah.
If you're a beginner, you don't know how to sift through that information, and there, people get good at talking like they know something. There's a lot of people on the internet like that. They have a nice little image, they have nice graphics, and they say, hey guys, today we're going to learn how to handstand. I'm going to teach you how to handstand real quick. First, what you got to do is put your hands on the floor. And then, oh wow, like look at that energy. This guy knows what he's talking about. And it might be complete shit advice from somebody who had barely trained it, but how do you know?
Yeah.
You don't know that it's shit advice unless you've had enough experience with the good advice to sift through it. And if you are training on your own, it takes you longer to find that path. You're going to be wandering through the woods lost for a while, as opposed to like, hey, that way is north.
Yeah.
So you get a direction that can take you further in the training potentially. And I've done most of my training myself. And at this point, when I'm learning something new, I like to keep a very specific ratio of theory, advice, and practice.
Yeah.
So I want to try something without any context to see what happens, then research it to see what I could be doing better, then get advice from somebody who notices more than I do, because it's like you develop these layers of vision.
Yeah.
And when you're a beginner in something, you don't know, like I'm getting into shooting guns recently, and it's like, okay, you hold the pistol like this and like this. And then one guy at the range is like, oh no, see what you got to do is do this, this, and this, and then put your thumb there. And that's why your shots are going right, because your trigger is, 2 millimeters too far this way compared to your finger. So it's like layers of vision. And you don't have those layers of vision, and you only develop them through the experience.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that was too much information from me, but I like to keep a ratio of practice, just practicing with no expectation, research and theory on my own, and then 3, consulting a third eye. Consulting a third eye, not the third eye.
You can get the pineal gland floss there to get the fluoride off it.
Who has a better, a more nuanced understanding of the skill than I do, to get a little bit of direction. And that's how I approach learning something new right now.
Yeah, no, that's like how I would approach it as well. It's very good. It's very rational. It's one of the things you just said in there that I want to cycle a bit backwards to, is one of the things when you're teaching yourself is the concept of unknowns. There is known unknowns. Okay, I don't know how to do this technique, but I can find out. But there's a lot of stuff that you mightn't actually even know about. And this is one of the things where a coach goes in. It's like, oh, you don't know about what you're causing a problem later down the line by doing this one thing, but it seems like it's working faster. But then at the same time, you could figure it out. This is the kind of thing. You can learn anything by yourself and you can figure it out. Or you can try and get on someone's experience and figure it out faster. It also does, it's one of those things that kind of irked me about, we had a bit of debate about this question, and all the preamble to it is, there is learning styles. And a lot of the people I know who are very, very physically talented would not be able to translate a written description of a trick into the physical trick. Whereas if you showed it to them once, they'd be able to do it straight away. And it's that kind of idea of like, there is just learning styles, and there is people who can learn very well from video. And all you have to see is like, do people learn from video? Well, all we have to see is all the people who have watched all the videos and can't do something as well, and all the people who can. So there is this kind of, taking information and turning it into action is definitely something that some people can do.
Yeah.
And then taking demonstration, like there's other people I know, like myself. So like if I learn dance or something like that, I need someone to break it down step by step. I cannot learn dance visually. But if someone breaks it down step by step, I get the sequence, then I can do it. But if someone goes like the normal dance class, here's your choreography, copy along, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
But I can dance when I know what I'm doing. And it's that kind of idea, like my learning style for dance is just not copy. So it's this kind of idea that there is learning styles in this. So you can learn by yourself. Maybe you'd learn better from text than video, or maybe you'd learn better from video than text. Or maybe you need photos and like good old school like line drawings to get it. So there is, finding your learning style, I suppose, is one of the lessons here.
Yeah, and I think like for stuff like, because you also mentioned specifically like, online coaching or workshops and things like this. For workshops, I think it's quite clear actually, because there you have, like we just talked about, the energy exchange, and I think that is kind of a big part of it, and you get a lot of perspective of one specific person. And I'm sure that like if someone went and they did coaching with all us three, they would get a chunk that's similar, a chunk that's different, and then they would get each of our kind of personal perspectives on it. And I think these things are rather important for a lot of people. And then it also, like, the factor of trust. Like, it's one thing that, like, when I started doing stuff like online coaching, I was quite skeptical. I was just like, am I going to charge money for this? So I actually taught a couple of people for free first to see, okay, can I get any results? Like, is this a tangible process? And like, one thing you're contributing with is, okay, you're practicing these things, these particular drills. I mean, you can find the drills anywhere, but you're giving the drills context and intent so that you know what you're trying to do with them and how to do that. And then you're allowing for adjustment of that, so that, okay, yeah, you have now progressed a lot on this, not so much on that. Okay, then we switch this one around a bit and this one stays the same, so on and so on. But then there's also the fact that, like, someone, if a person decides to spend money on something, it is also kind of a commitment to themselves, is something that I started suddenly understanding. It's like, yeah, it's kind of a contract with themselves that, okay, I'm going to do this work. Because again, we need to assume the fact that people have lives. Some people are in the situation where they very easily can manage to learn certain skills, and it goes rather fast, and that's great. But some people need to have a schedule. Like a guy I just started working with now, like, he said, I can work 3 days a week maybe, because, like, I have 2 kids. Like, okay, can you help me to get something done here? Sure, we can get some stuff done, because he wanted this during this phase. But and having that, an outside person, and I fucking know, because I have done so much bad training because it's only been me. Holy shit, I've done bad training, like, way too much, or completely sporadic, changed perspective from week to week to week to week, because I just read something new, I want to try this thing. Oh, what about this perspective? And, like, and I've trained for like 2 decades soon, and I've still made, like, these types of mistakes up until this day. I still have done and do this. So, like, having someone that just pulls you back and say, okay, this might be the thing to focus on rather than that, it can be very helpful. And I think that's the same in anything. If I want to learn, like, computer programming, I'd probably look up a bunch of things online, but then, like, talking with someone who really knows programming, that can give me some input and understanding, and suddenly they give me a sense of parallax too. Okay, so this is what goes on further down the line, and this is how he thinks, and then this happened before that, and you get a sense of, like, the time frame and the depth of it in a way that I think can be important, at least for many people.
Yeah, you can see the path, and it's like, this is what I say. I'm actually about to put out a YouTube video on this where I talk about, like, a good teacher, a good coach can see into the future. So to
no, it's good. It's literally
to get, we're going real third eye, but yeah, to get into this cliche of, like, what with handstands specifically, because there's very little instant gratification, instant feedback. It's like, the handstands that you're doing today are for a skill that you may not be doing in 6 months from now. And that's something you have to understand. And a good teacher will understand, again, how to sift through, like, what is useful now that's still going to be useful then, or what you're doing now, how it's actually going to hurt you then. And same thing, I trained for many years out of ignorance, and with handstands, because it's slow, I managed to fix a lot of it. But with acrobatics, I built a shitload of bad habits because I just didn't know. I didn't know the path. I didn't know how long it was going to take. I didn't know what basics or fundamentals were needed to go towards that path. And I was doing things that I was scared of. So on top of not knowing, I was putting myself in a fear panic mindset, which instilled those habits even worse. And it took me years to break them. And some habits I still never even broke completely. Now, it gave me a better perspective as a teacher, but who knows? Maybe even if I had a teacher during that time, I would have been like, fuck you, you don't know me. You don't know anything. I can learn this shit by myself. So maybe even if I had that knowledge or direction back then, maybe I wasn't mature enough to handle it. So yeah, it's this idea that, like, you may be making mistakes now that you don't know are going to fuck you later if your intent was to turn this into a long-term high level practice, and a good teacher will be able to see into the future and say like, hey, that step you're taking now is something that you should fix now before
Yeah.
it becomes something bigger later on.
Oh, this was a two-parter question as well from the man, so this kind of leads into it. Is do you know of any hand balancers who have not attended a circus school or who have not had a coach and are still on a very high level? We're talking about beautiful figas and other advanced positions.
There's a lot at this point.
Yeah.
But also, like, here's the other question, is the definition of, is it an in-person coach? Because realistically, even if I'm self-taught, I wasn't locked in a basement training by myself. I was still watching possibilities of people do it. So even then, it's like, it's not an isolated scenario, because now there's so much, back in the day, I had watched every YouTube video there was about hand balancing.
Me too.
Yeah.
Because there's only like 3 pages worth. There weren't that many. Now you can't. And it's this idea that, is anyone completely self-taught? Because
Well, I think the context is like, do
completely-
you know anyone who's actually gotten really good without spending cash? Is I think this person's
a lot of
context.
people.
Yeah, loads.
A lot of people.
Loads.
Yeah, it's just it's mindset. Like, some people have that mindset. You have to be obsessive. You have to put in the work. You have to do the research. It's all out there.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to actually put the time in, it's very possible. But not everyone's going to get there, because not everyone has that personality type to do that.
Yeah.
And that's not a good or bad thing. Like you said, it's just different learning styles. A lot of people can have a great success with that, no problem.
Yeah. And then you have people, I mean, perfect example, Morgan, for example, who you taught Emmet, who then went and trained in Kiev and stuff. But I mean, he had super talent at handstand, and he's super crazy good. And he could probably have gotten pretty good without ever meeting you. But since he met you and he got good feedback, then he was able to use that as a ramp and skyrocket off of. So I think that a lot of people that end up seeing that they are learning pretty well and either want to take it seriously, perhaps as a career or whatnot, they might want to search out someone because they see that they could maybe make better progress with that, or they could at least be and immerse themselves in an environment where these things happen. And I think that is also something, I mean, of course, in kind of the more community context, such as, I mean, if it's tricking or breaking or circus or acrobatics, that you enter into a community where loads of people do stuff. If you are in that context, then you can get super good. And I mean, like, another friend of mine, Andreas the Rick, like, he became like a super mutant monster hand balancer in a really short amount of time. He did some classes with Sasha, my coach in circus school, but he's also one of the best acrobats I know. So you have, like, he didn't, quote unquote, need much coaching, because he has a work ethic and a body and a skill level that surrounds the hand balancing practice, which is so high that boom, explosion. And there's tons of people that have gotten really good, and it's all possible. But I think it's very relevant what you said, Yuri. It's like, what is self-taught in this scenario? Is it not spending cash? Absolutely. But I think that every time, like, if you're in a context where you work with people and you're struggling with someone gives you a tip, like, I mean, that is just great. I think it's a bit bullshit to also glorify the idea of the self-taught, because it's not necessarily always helpful nor important to be self-taught. I mean, if you can and you want to, then absolutely. But like you said, like when you said with that you built in weird patterns and stuff with your acro, I was thinking back to my breakdancing, my b-boy, like when I was training power moves. Like, if I was just training like the kids do, and when I was training like the kids that I was training with, if I wasn't analyzing every single thing, looking frame by frame on videos on YouTube and all the tutorials and shit, I would have gotten good. Because those kids, they just did 18 flares instead of analyzing how to do 2. So,
and I didn't, like, I never even saw a video of myself until I was 5 years into my training.
Yeah, it's kind of
like, I didn't even have access to video. So it's like, just doing it.
Times.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. I remember there was like there was no camera phones when I was in circus school, or
Yeah.
up until like whatever. When the camera phones got popular, like 2011. So I had about 10 years of training, like proper professional training, without ever cameraizing, except on a dodgy VHS every now and then.
And there's something magical about that too. Like you don't know,
Yeah,
you don't get feedback, so you just do it again.
yeah.
Mm.
I remember like the closest
And
we
then
ever
you keep
had
doing
was
it.
like we had these mirrors you could roll around the space in circus school. So you could set a mirror up, and if you could face the right way, you'd be able to, vaguely, like in a dance room, which is portable, but you'd be vaguely able to check things if you were crossing the mirror and looking at it, and then learning bad habits while looking at the mirror. Right, gentlemen. So I'm gonna wrap up the podcast there. But Yuri, would you like to pimp yourself a little and tell us about what's going on with you?
Yeah, let's do that. So I've also moved a lot of my training online because I don't know what's happening with the world and it's too unpredictable, and I don't want to pay multiple thousands of dollars of getting my pineal gland jammed just in order to go somewhere. I'm not going to get into my thoughts on vaccines because that would be a whole different podcast. So I moved a lot of my stuff online. I just launched a new online platform where I'm going to do regular live classes with people, but through the electronic medium. So there's communication lost, but unless you want to come to Vegas and train with me, it's a good option. But you can come to Vegas and train with me if you want, because I do live here and I don't think I'm going to be going. I don't know what's happening with going places. So I just launched that, and then I had 2 classes and my internet went out. So I had to reschedule those classes because I didn't have internet to be able to actually run them the last few days. So that's kind of a bad omen, but I'm going to say as like I get knocked down, I'm going to get back up.
Maybe you need that COVID vaccine to get 5G. You can just emanate it.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't have enough 5G in my system. So I just launched that. There's another video course that's going to be launching next month. It's basically, I'm excited about this one because I didn't do the editing. It was actually edited by professional editors, and it's got, like the words underneath of what I'm saying and different camera angles. And so those are going to be courses from a live workshop that I taught in Florida last month. I forget the website. It's called Reps. Yeah, I'm excited to that because the footage looks really good because it's not just me with a tripod.
Yeah,
Awesome.
In my living room.
Nice.
So that's something that I appreciate because I can't run multiple cameras and microphone and teach a workshop at the same time, much less spend the hours it takes to edit that properly. So those are 2 things. I do offer one-on-one online coaching, but I'm probably, just to be honest, going to start phasing that out a little bit because, like I said, my stove only has 4 burners.
Yeah.
I like to cook many delicious meals with different courses, and I just don't have time to do everything at once. So probably the one-on-one online coaching is something that's going to start getting phased out in the near future.
So get in quick.
That, yeah, get in. Because also, like, I don't know, maybe I customize it too much. I don't have a template, so I write everything from scratch for the people.
Yeah. No,
But then I realize, like, how much time it takes me, and then I have to record videos as part of that. I'm like, man, that's a long time.
Yeah, I have the same problem with my
don't-
coaching as well. It's like I do one-on-one, but I don't work on templates, so everything is just like, and then I have people doing everything. It's like I have people, pure professional hand balancers, all the way to someone who does CrossFit, handstands, bodybuilding, and everything on top of it while having 4 kids. And you're just like, templates don't work here.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah. And that's the issue with me is just, the time, because now I'm getting, like, all of these other things set up that are also taking my time. So
Yeah.
I can't do everything at once. So it's going to be more of the online courses, and for now the online classes, because those classes are going to be archived, and it's going to be like a whole thing where the more classes I do, the bigger the archive of classes it's going to be. So it's going to be...
Nice. You're basically making like Yuri flicks.
What's that?
Yuri flicks. Like Netflix, but Yuri.
Oh, yeah, basically. So that's kind of what it's going to turn into. So I'm going to stick with that. And I'd love to teach in person again, like depending on, I guess, which states of the U.S. are free. Right now it's kind of state to state, depending on how much freedom you get. So I'm open to doing in-person workshops in the U.S. if anybody's interested. I don't think any international travel is going to happen with a U.S. passport anytime soon, and I don't want to get shots or pineal gland pokings just to be able to travel.
Cool.
Right.
So anyway, if people are interested in working with Yuri, we will have the links to all his stuff on our website as well. So if you can't find them, but I'm sure you can, you'll find them there. Other than that, yeah, it's an awesome podcast.
Thanks so
It was really
much,
interesting for me.
For coming.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, pleasure.
Super.
Yeah, awesome. Other than that, we will see everyone else listening in Listenerland next week.
Cheers.
Thank you, Yuri, and thank you, Mikael.
Later.